Hey besties, here's a new follower story called Toxic Bestie. Me and my bestie have been super close since elementary school. She was my only friend all the way through high school, basically my sister. That's why it hurt so much when I had to end our friendship. But I just couldn't have such a jealous, hateful person around me. It took me way too long to realize, but I started to notice how toxic she was after we graduated high school. We applied and got accepted to the same college. Right before we started, she dyed her hair the exact same color as me and completely switched up her style to something similar to mine. Now you might think I'm just being a little self-centered because I thought I was too, but this was the first red flag. Red flag number 2 came when we went on a double date with 2 guys we met on campus. The night of the date, I was showing my bestie the outfits and she had me change like 3 times, telling me it was too much for the dinner date. To me, there was nothing wrong with what I had on, but I thought she was looking out for my best interest, wanted me to look good for the night, so I kept changing until she was comfortable with what I was wearing. Red flag number 3 came that night. Anytime during our double date, when I got a compliment from my guy, my bestie would intervene and say, "Oh, well that's just genetics, she didn't do anything special." Basically downplaying my looks to genetic luck, as if she didn't copy my entire style. The guys and I would laugh it off awkwardly, but even they could tell that what she was saying was really hurtful. I mean, any other time she would be boosting me up, but in front of these guys, she was acting a bit shady. There were some other undercover hater things that she did that night, like embarrassing stories about me, letting me know there was something in my teeth in front of everyone, and pretty much spent most of the night trying to make everything I say sound dumb. When we got home, I told her exactly how I felt about it. She apologized, saying that we tease each other all the time. I was just being sensitive about it. We did joke around a lot. That was kind of our friendship, teasing each other, but this didn't feel right. Of course, we made up that same night and actually ended up not seeing those boys again. But a month or so later, I met a man at the bar and we started dating. She was so excited for me, but when she finally met him, she immediately started calling him Big Brother. Red flag number 4. See, there were these tiny red flags that just kept popping up and I couldn't ignore them. Like, without my knowledge, she went and got my man's phone number through Facebook. She claimed it was so she could ask him if he's talked to me when I wasn't answering my phone, but why did she have a picture of him as his contact? And why was his name in her phone as Big Brother with a heart and water dripping emojis? It was red flags everywhere, y'all. My boyfriend had even came and told me that she had asked him for a ride to work recently on a day that she knew I was available to take her. She claimed that she just didn't want to ask me again because she had already asked me for a ride earlier that week, but things were starting to get real uncomfortable. But let me tell y'all about my birthday night. Me and my bestie and a couple of my homegirls all went out to the club for a girls' night. My boyfriend had no issue with this because we trusted each other, but after this night out, our trust was completely broken. So we get to the club all dressed up. I've got my birthday tiara on and we got the VIP section turned up. Of course, the men were flocked around me and my homegirls, all eyes on me, the birthday girl. Y'all know this drove my best friend insane. Anytime a dude came up to me, she would let him chat with me for about 2 seconds before saying, she has a man. After 3 guys walked up, she had had enough. She angrily told me that she's not going to be batting off men all night for me, especially if I got a good, fine-looking man at home. I thought she was just trying to be funny, so I laughed, but she said, "No, for real. If you're going to be out here trying to cheat, I don't want anything to do with this." What was she talking about? I was entertaining the conversations, but I had no plans on cheating, just having fun. Then she starts arguing with the other girls in VIP over petty stuff, and we just ended the night early. The mood was kind of ruined, but I was so turned up, I barely remember the ride home. All I know is that I woke up the next morning in bed with my boyfriend next to me pissed off. He tells me that my best friend said I was in every dude's face last night at the club. I didn't think I was, but regardless, why would she tell him that? I had to convince him that I was faithful, and I should have ended the friendship with her then, but unfortunately I didn't. The final straw was when I found out she took my identity and was catfishing men on OnlyFish as me. Like for part 2. Hey besties, here's the final part of Toxic Bestie. So yeah, you heard me right. My best friend from elementary school stole my identity and catfished on OnlyFish with it, and in the creepiest way possible. The only reason I found out is because my brother found the account. Yeah, that sounds super weird, so let me explain. After a little misunderstanding with my birthday night, me and my boyfriend agreed to take a break from each other. We needed some distance to sort things out, so he moved back home. I had cut off my supposedly bestie for snitching on me, but she somehow snaked her way back into my life by showing up at family events and parties, begging for forgiveness. She was my ride or die, and even my family liked having her around, so my mom eventually convinced me to forgive her. Huge mistake. So here's how she set up the Only Fish account posing as me. My mom noticed I was a little down and in the dumps since my boyfriend and I were on a break, so she graciously bought me and my bestie a hotel near the beach. You know, so we could have a little mini vacation and get our friendship back on track. I was in need of some fun and some sun, so off we went. The hotel was super nice, and once we unpacked, we immediately headed out to the beach. We spent 3 days laid out under the sun, drinking, relaxing, and talking about old times. Everything was copacetic until the first red flag popped up and I didn't even notice. I had packed several bikinis for the trip, and every day my best friend would want to do a whole photo shoot of me on her phone. She said it was for Instagram and memories, but the angles she was doing were kind of provocative. Like I said earlier, we were sisters, so I really didn't read too much into it, but the next red flag was after these little photo shoots, she would be on her phone for 2 hours straight, not paying me any mind. I tried to see what she was doing, but she kept her phone light dim. When we would get back to the hotel, I'd be so exhausted from drinking, tanning, and walking that I would immediately pass out. My bestie, however, would be wide awake, and I found out later on that she was taking pictures of me in my bikini while I was asleep. Yeah, it gets weirder. I'd also hear her camera shutter go off while she was walking behind me, and once I even caught her camera flash on. Y'all, I legitimately had no idea though. I just thought she wanted to capture memories. We were always taking photos together growing up, but it was starting to creep me out that she was so focused on me. The last day at the hotel, I couldn't find one of my favorite bikinis, and I eventually gave up, thinking the housekeeping might have stolen it. I found out later that my best friend had taken it, but wait, it'll all make sense in just a minute. So, this is how I found out about the account. Well, my brother did. After our little mini vacation, me and Bestie were back on track, and I felt like things were getting back to normal. I was still in communication with my ex, and we were working on things, but he was being sort of distant. I could tell something was off, but I just didn't know what. I let him take me out to dinner, and at dinner I demanded to see his phone so I could know for sure that he wasn't talking to someone else before we actually got back together. Reluctantly, he gave it to me. There were a couple girls on his phone, but the main one that stuck out to me was my bestie. They had been texting a lot lately, and she had been sending him pictures of herself. The messages were extremely flirty, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I tossed the phone back at him and stormed out the restaurant. I headed straight to my bestie's house, but she must have been at work because she wasn't home. I needed to confront her ASAP. I tried to call, but no answer. I had a feeling that he had contacted her first, and she was just avoiding me. That's fine. I got all night. I sat right in front of her apartment building, waiting for her to come home. While I was sitting in the parking lot, I got a call from my brother. When I answered, he sounded pissed off. "Are you selling your bikini photos?" he asked. I had no idea what he was talking about. "I just found your Only Fish account," he said. I was shocked. I asked him to send me the link and told him it wasn't me. "Oh, it's for sure you," he told me, but he sent me the link and his login. My jaw dropped. For only $5, you could see bikini photos and trashy videos of me. There was even a link further down where you could buy my bikini unwashed. And sleeping videos for $2. I was so flabbergasted by what I was seeing that I didn't even realize that my brother had paid to see all these photos. But anyway, I was pissed. As I'm scrolling through the fake page, my bestie's car finally pulls up. I'm enraged. All I see is red. It could only have been her. Not only was she trying to take my man, but she was trying to make money off of photos of me, basically pretending to be me. I don't even think she noticed my car parked there when she pulled up because she just gets out and starts walking towards the door. I immediately jump out of my vehicle, running full speed at her, tackling her to the ground, and I just start swinging. I would never condone violence, but karma wasn't moving fast enough for me. There was no explanation needed. She knew why I was there. It took 2 neighbors to pull me off, but I walked away with a brand new wig in hand. I cut her and my boyfriend off immediately and told my cousins if she comes to another family event, it's on site. And if you're listening to this, sis, it still is. Thanks for listening, Luna. Thank you so much for sending in your story, but I got some questions about your brother. But anyway, comment red flag emojis down below for a new story. Hey besties, I had you guys go on my Instagram and choose the story time that I was going to tell for today. Here's one of your top 2 picks. This story time is called Sleeping Around at the Job. You might want to make sure you're sitting down for this one because it's going to get kind of crazy. Hey Luna, hopefully you see this message because I really want to share my story time about how I slept around at work, ended up quitting, and scared for my life. So, I'm a waitress at Applebee's, and if you work in a restaurant, you already know how messy it can get. My job was just like any other one, you know, cooks and waitresses flirting with each other, married or not. Friday nights we'd all go down to the bar and take a couple after-work shots. There were a lot of fine guys working in the kitchen, so you already know I would get a couple of drinks in me and start flirting. See, flirting with taken men at work was innocent to me at first, but then I ended up hooking up with 2 or 3 of them and word got out around the job. So a lot of the other waitresses at work really didn't like me. They tried to act as if I was doing too much, but I figured they were just jealous that the guys they were crushing on were flirting with me. Whenever we would go back to work the next day, the other waitresses really wouldn't talk to me much, so I would spend most of my time talking to the cooks. There was one cook in particular that caught my eye. He was new, and I could tell the other guys were talking about how I got around because he kept giving me this look. I finally caught him on a Friday night, and we took a couple shots together that ended up in us leaving together. I know, before you even judge me, I was 19, fresh out of the house, wild and free, so I know we've all been there. Believe me, I learned my lesson. So anyway, we hook up and the next day I come into work all cute and dressed up, expecting to see him there, but he's not there. So everyone's freaking out now because we don't have a cook. I'm rushing around trying to do my job when I hear a woman up front yelling. I look around the corner and there's a huge woman standing up front demanding to speak to, and I quote, "the whore who was in my man's back seat last night." My heart dropped as flashbacks ran through my mind of last night. She was looking for me. I dipped back in the kitchen praying that no one knew who she was talking about, but all the waitresses were back there whispering and staring at me. They were shaking their head in disappointment while others laughed. I could hear the woman's yell getting closer to the kitchen, and I knew it was only a matter of seconds before she came back here. My manager yells, "You can't go back there," before the woman comes rushing around the corner. "Where is she?" she screams as I duck behind the cutting board. The other waitresses don't say anything, but they all turn towards me, as if I'm supposed to answer. Me and the woman lock eyes, and I must have had guilt written all over my face because she immediately knew. She charges towards me, and I rush around to the back of the kitchen, managing to snatch a chef knife off of the cutting board. I hold it up at her, and thankfully she stops. I watch her eyes dart around looking for her own weapon. It was about to get serious. My manager finally makes his way over to us and demands the woman gets out of the restaurant, but she's not listening. She's grabbing bowls, condiments, silverware, and tossing them at me. My manager and another cook drag her out of the restaurant, and she yells in my direction saying, "I'll be out here when you get off, ho." And yeah, y'all, she was indeed out there when I got off. I could see her from the window. She was standing in between me and the area where I parked my car. There was no way around her, and it was closing time. All the other waitresses had already got off, and I was waiting for the manager so he could walk me to my car. But I'm not gonna lie, you guys, I did not feel safe with this man. He was shorter than me and half my weight. I was better off fighting by myself, all over a man that I barely knew. I hated myself for going around doing whatever I wanted, thinking there wouldn't be consequences. My manager was taking forever, and I was starting to overthink it, so I decided to wait for a good time and just make a mad dash for my car. She was pacing back and forth, so I timed it right, busted through the door, and went knees to chest all the way to my vehicle. I heard her footsteps pounding close behind me as I stabbed the unlock button on my keys. I opened the door, slide into the driver's seat, and slammed the door behind me. Just as I locked the door, she grabs the handle and yanks it. She starts beating on the window, demanding I get out. That's when I see a flash in her hand. She was holding a pocket knife. Terrified, I start my engine, planning on backing up, but she steps behind my vehicle and ducks. I couldn't see her, and I had no idea what she was doing until I heard a popping noise. Then another pop. She was popping all my tires. I dug in my purse to grab my phone and call 911, but I realized I left it inside. But my manager was still there. I set off the alarm with my keys to get his attention, and luckily he heard it. My manager comes outside yelling at her to get away from my vehicle because he was calling the police. She jumps in her vehicle, flicking me off, and when I'm able to get out and see the damage, I just start crying. My manager takes me home, and the next day I get my car towed. Of course I quit, too embarrassed and afraid to go back. I know what you're thinking. I should have called the police. But honestly, I knew it was just my karma. I work at a new restaurant now, and though I still flirt with the cooks, I know not to shit where I eat, especially if I can't fight. Thanks for listening, Luna. Well, I guess sometimes you just gotta learn the hard way, right? Thank you so much for sharing your story, and don't go far because I already have another story time ready to post at 2K like. Hey besties, here's your #1 pick from the poll on Instagram today. Follower story, I'm in love with my cousin. Hey Luna, please keep this story anonymous because I do not need my family to know yet. But I'm asking the internet for help on this situation. I'm madly and deeply in love with my cousin, and yes, he's my first cousin. I'm 23 and he's 25. We did not grow up together. Though he lived close by, his family would only come visit like once or twice a year. But every time I saw him, y'all, he would look better and better. I mean, he was fine. He didn't look like anyone else in the family. Some of my aunts even said that maybe he wasn't related to us. As soon as I heard that, that's all I needed to hear. He was no longer off limits to me. I added him on Facebook when I was 19 and we would message back and forth occasionally, just checking on each other to see how we were doing. But one night after a little bit of drinking with my friends, I messaged him a winky face. He replied back with a question mark and I said, "Where you at?" The universal words for "do you want to hook up?" He picked up the hint immediately and said, "For real?" I was for real, and I wanted to prove it, so I sent him a picture. He liked the picture and replied back, "I'm out driving, do you want me to come scoop you?" I waited about 10 minutes just to make him sweat a little, and then I said yeah. As soon as he read the message, I quickly hopped out of bed and got dressed. I rushed downstairs past my parents. My mom asked me as I was walking out the door where I was going, and I was like, just down the street real quick. I'll be right back. I did not want her to see him picking me up. I met him at the end of the street, and we went to a nearby gas station where he bought me a couple more drinks. We drank, catching up on old times, chatting, but one thing led to another, and yeah, we hooked up. We hooked up a couple more times after that. Soon after, we started dating secretly. It was fun and exciting sneaking around, but then my mom started to catch on. I basically told on myself. Instead of walking down the street for him to pick me up, I just started telling my mom that I was going to hang out with him. I mean, he was my cousin, so she didn't think twice about it. That is, until she realized we were going out every weekend and I was coming home at 2 in the morning. One night, I came home after hooking up with him and she could tell by my smudged lipstick and my frizzy hair. She looked in horror out the window as she saw my cousin's car pulling out the driveway. "Please tell me you didn't," she said. I just ran up to my room. She chased me up the stairs screaming and begging me to end the relationship with him, but I wasn't listening. There was no way I was going to stop seeing him. I was in love with him. She followed me to my room arguing about it and told me if I didn't leave him alone, I was going to be kicked out. I locked myself in my room crying. How could she be so judgmental? I called my cousin and told him what was going on, thinking he was going to be understanding and help me think of a way for us to move in together, but instead, he told me we couldn't talk anymore. He didn't want my mom to tell his mom what was going on. I was heartbroken that he cared more about what they thought than me. So we broke up, and my mom never told anyone out of her embarrassment, but a year later, I saw him at the family reunion. He was looking good as always, so I walked up to him and tried to chat for a bit, but I could feel my mom burning a hole in the back of my head. She was watching us like a hawk, but I didn't care. I missed him. We made plans to text each other, and when I hit him up, he asked to link for dinner. We met up, and it was just like old times, but he had moved out of his mom's house and was living on his own. So he invited me over, and we hooked up. I fell back in love. I went home with a smile on my face, but that smile quickly faded when I texted him the next morning, and I was blocked. I didn't know what I did wrong. I was heartbroken. For weeks I cried myself to sleep until I started feeling sick. I figured I just had the flu or something, but when I went to the clinic, I found out I was 2 weeks pregnant. Guess who I was with 2 weeks ago? My cousin. So now I'm a month pregnant and I have no idea how to tell him or my family. I need some advice from you and your followers, Luna, because I know my mom's gonna freak out and I don't think they're gonna support it. Also, I heard there could be a lot of medical issues, but I do really want to keep the baby, even if the father doesn't want to be involved. How am I supposed to tell my family that I'm pregnant by my cousin? Hey besties, over 200 of you guys voted on my Instagram poll today, so here's your number one choice for the story time. Follower story. Hey Luna, something super crazy happened to me a couple years ago that completely changed the dynamics of my family, and honestly, I wish it never happened. It was senior year, and in one of my classes we were studying genetics. I was interested in dominant and non-dominant genes, what characteristics were more likely to be passed down in our family. My immediate family consists of my mom, my dad, my sister, and a couple houses down live my mom's sister, her husband, and their kids. I started thinking about the dominant traits in my family, how my mom, dad, and me had brown hair, but my sister had blonde. Meaning someone in our family must have had blonde hair, so there was a chance that my child could come out blonde. While I was lost in thought, my teacher brought up 23andMe, telling us that we could send in a DNA sample and get the results back online. I was interested, but it was really expensive. I went home and asked my mom if we could try it, and to my surprise, she said absolutely not. She didn't want us sending out our DNA to some company. She thought it was some kind of conspiracy. I was really disappointed. I felt like these were answers I deserved to know, and Mom was just being selfish. Of course, I couldn't afford it myself, so after being unable to convince her, I took her bank card while she was asleep, and I ordered it myself. I regret this because not only did I lose my mom's trust, I ruined our family. I was able to intercept the package when it got delivered, so my mom didn't see it. I followed the instructions on the box and it was really simple. Once I sent it in, I got my result back within a couple days. At first glance, it was really cool. I found out I was partially Jewish and I had a relative in the Holocaust. As I'm reading through the information, jotting down stuff to research later, I realized that it said my sister was my half-sister. Yeah, that can't be true. We both have the same mom and dad. Chopping it up to an error, I thought it'd be funny to prank my sister by showing her the results and telling her it meant she was adopted. But when I showed it to her, she didn't think it was funny. Before I could even stop her, she runs off to tell my mom. Mom, she got this crazy DNA test and she's trying to say I'm adopted. As soon as my mom heard DNA test, she looked into my eyes and I could tell she was hurt and angry. What DNA test? My dad asked. I was scared to show him, but I held up my phone and told him about the 23andMe. Interested, he asked if he could take a look. My mom interrupts him and says, "Oh, you know those things are never accurate." But my dad takes a look anyway. After looking at my phone for a really long time, he asked me and my sister to go up to our rooms. I thought he was joking at first, trying to prank us back, but I could tell he was serious. We went upstairs, but we kept our doors cracked, trying our best to hear what they were talking about. We heard muffled arguing, then we heard Mom crying, then we heard Dad leaving. What did I just do? After Dad left, I went downstairs to check on Mom, but as soon as she saw me, she screamed at me to go back upstairs. I was in deep shit. When I got back upstairs, my sister looked so scared. "What if I am adopted?" she asked. "You're not," I told her, trying to convince her. "But something is weird, and we need to find out what." We stayed in our rooms, and Dad didn't come home that night. The next morning when we saw Mom at breakfast, she looked tired. She sipped her coffee, staring out the window in silence. Just as we were heading off to school, she stopped my sister and said, "When you come home, we're going to the doctor." We had no idea what that meant until we arrived home from school and she took me and my sister to the clinic where she got my sister swabbed. On the way home, she told me and my sister no matter what these results are, we will always be a family. We begged and begged, but she wouldn't explain what she meant by that. When me and my sister got back to our room, we cried together. What if she was adopted? Or what if Dad isn't her dad? I was heartbroken and really angry at myself. The results came back a couple days later, and Mom called us downstairs. Dad had finally came home. He was waiting at the table with her. Mom had papers in her hand and looked like she had been crying. Dad's face was emotionless. We knew she had the results in her hand. But she just stood there in silence, unable to speak. My dad had to tell us. He looked my sister in the eye and said, basically, to sum it all up, "I'm not your father. Uncle James is. But you'll always be my daughter to me." Our jaws dropped. Uncle James lived down the street with my mom's sister. I had no idea he was sleeping with Mom. Anytime he came over, the only time he even went upstairs was to hang photos. Oh, maybe that wasn't hammering that we were hearing. My sister jumps up from the table and runs right out of the house. I got up and followed her out. She ran down the street and I ran right after her. She was going full speed. She kept running and running until she reached my aunt's house. Completely out of breath, I finally catch up to her, and she's banging on my aunt's door like crazy. When my aunt finally opens the door, she exposes everything, telling her that my mom had cheated with her husband. My aunt stood there with a straight face and said, "Yeah, I know," then slammed the door in my sister's face. What? So she knew the whole time and she was okay with it? Hey besties, let me hear your guesses down below and join me in part 2 for the real tea. Hey besties, here's part 2 of DNA results. Let's see if you guys guessed it right. So, we're standing outside my aunt's door, shook. So, she knew this whole time that my sister was her husband's daughter and she was okay with that? It just wasn't making any sense. Just as we were leaving, my Uncle James was pulling into his driveway. He saw my sister crying and asked what was going on. I explained to him about how my mom took my sister to go get that DNA test and how my parents were saying that he was her father. He didn't even look shocked. He just took a long, heavy, deep breath and explained everything to us. It turns out that him and my aunt didn't know for sure, but they had their suspicions this whole time. As soon as they saw my sister's blonde hair, they knew it. But my mom had convinced them 18 years ago that she had already taken a DNA test. Whatever results she had showed them were probably fake. I hope y'all are sitting down right now because this is why him and my aunt weren't surprised. Uncle James explains to us that when all of them were younger and they first got married, they were swingers. Uncle James says that when all of them were younger, they were swingers, meaning my mom and her sister traded husbands, vice versa with the wives. I was shocked and disgusted. So basically, my dad gave my mom to my uncle for the night, and she got pregnant by him. Then lied about who the father of the baby was, and probably gave them a fake DNA test. Me and my sister were floored. Our jaws were on the floor. I don't know what kind of freaky deaky stuff they were into, but it was weird. No wonder our parents didn't want to tell us the full story. My sister cried in my uncle's arms and he offered to take us home. When we got home, my uncle told my mom that he explained everything to us, and she started screaming at him, telling him to get out and banning us from ever going to my aunt's house again. Of course, my sister wasn't trying to hear that, and after repeatedly sneaking out, she eventually moved in with my aunt and her dad. And my aunt was super petty about it. She welcomed my sister with open arms, even gave her her own room, knowing my mom didn't want her over there. Mom even went over there with the police to try to get my sister to come home. My aunt opened the door, and when she saw the police, she told them, "I don't see a problem. She's here with her dad." And she was right. There was nothing my mom could do about it. My sister could stay there if she wanted to, and she did. She still lives there. Me, however, I had to go back home to my mom and dad, where they were pissed at me. They lectured me about minding my own business, and my mom didn't even talk to me for 3 months. They acted like it was my fault that a secret came out. I feel really bad for my sister, though. She grew up thinking that was her dad, and now they don't even talk. Thankfully, she has a really great loving relationship with Uncle James. Her dad. But anyway, Luna, here's my question to you and your followers. This year is our family reunion. No one else in our family knows about them being swingers. So my mom, my dad, my aunt, and Uncle James have all asked us to keep this a huge secret. They want us to go to the reunion and act like my sister is living back at home with us. We can't say anything about Uncle James and Dad. Me and my sister talked about it, and we think this should be exposed. We should be able to tell the truth. I want to know what you and your followers would do, Luna, and thanks for listening. Thanks for sending in your story, bestie. Personally, I would take the DNA test, print it out about 1,000 times, and put it on every seat at the reunion. There's no reason you should have to hide this, but I hope everything works out. What do you guys think? And I need some new nails. Comment some colors down below. Hey besties, are you ready for a new story time? I have a juicy new story for you that I'm sure a couple of us moms can relate to. Follower story. Hey Luna, I love watching your story times and hearing all the tea. So I had to spill to you my story about how I ended up in a fight with my son's soccer coach and a couple of the moms. My son loves soccer. He's been playing on the same league for 3 years, and to me, he's one of the best players on the team. Most of the teammates and the parents were pretty chill. Now his coach, on the other hand, don't get me wrong, he's good at his job, training the kids, but as far as disciplining and pushing good sportsmanship, he's trash. Now I said most of his teammates were chill, but there's this one new kid that was sent from the pits of hell. Now I know I don't have the perfect child, but this kid has absolutely no home training. From day one, he was bullying my child, taking the ball from him when they're on the same team, elbowing him on purpose, tripping him and laughing, and he threw fits at every game. Each time my son got injured, me and my husband would jump up from our chairs and wait for the coach to say something, but the coach would just stand there or act like he didn't see anything. I would have to hold back my husband from saying something. I didn't want to be those parents out there screaming and yelling at the coach, but it happened one too many times. So I talked to the coach, and he told me that there was really nothing he could do about it because you can't kick kids off of the league unless their parents agree. But that doesn't mean you have to let them play, I told the coach. The coach completely blew me off and told me if I didn't like it, I can just switch teams. We were pissed. My husband called him a coward, and the coach threatened to have us removed from the field. We just had to let it go. Now I know what you're thinking. This kid must be an all-star player. That's why the coach doesn't do anything about it, but this kid was trash. I'm sorry, I know he was a child, but it's not like he was carrying the team. Probably one of the worst players on the team, and a sore loser at that. If we lost, he would pop the soccer ball and throw a tantrum, while everyone just watched. His mom would sit on the sideline and act like she didn't see anything. She wouldn't even come over and make him stop. I was dumbfounded by how much this kid was getting away with. Then I found out his parents were making huge donations to the league. It all made sense now. When I heard that, I knew I had to say something. But my son begged me not to, so I waited until the last game. Unfortunately, we lost it, which threw that kid into a fit. He tossed himself on the ground screaming while everyone watched. Then he got up, grabbed a soccer ball, and booted it halfway across the field. On the other side of the field was my son, and it smacked him right in the back of his head. My son falls to the ground, screaming out in pain, while me and my husband rush over to make sure he's okay. Thankfully, we think he's fine, but we're worried about a concussion. So now we have to skip their team party and head to the hospital. Before we go, though, I need to handle that kid real quick. So as my husband was loading the kids into the vehicle, I run over to the kid's mom, who's facing in another direction, pretending she didn't just see what happened. "I know you just saw that," I said. She turns around, looking surprised. "Your kid just kicked the ball at my child's skull while throwing a fit over there," I said, pointing at her child on the ground screaming. The kid's mom takes off her sunglasses, smirks, and says, "Well, I'm sure it was an accident." "Accident or not," I told her, "your kid needs to control themselves. All season he's been acting out and bullying my child." She looked me up and down and said, "Well, why are you just now saying this? You had all season." I could feel my body shaking with anger, but I took a deep breath and said, "I talked to the coach, but he didn't do anything about it." She laughed and said, "Why would he do anything about it? You should have came to me about it, but it's a little bit too late." She winked, put her sunglasses on, and walked away before I could respond. Look, I completely understand not always being able to control your kid, but letting your kid assault my kid and not take accountability for it was putting me on a whole new level of anger. Not angry with the kid, but angry with her and the coach. All I saw was red. I grabbed the closest soccer ball and just beamed it at the back of her head. Hey besties, here's part 2 of Soccer Game Showdown. But remember y'all, I'm trying to post back to back, so you can't use this comment to go to part 1. You're gonna have to use the playlist. Or you can go to my page and it was the story time right before this one. While you're there, check out all the tea I spilled within the past week. Part 2. Once the ball smacked the back of her head, she fell face first right into a mud puddle on the field, breaking her sunglasses. I mean, she didn't put her arms out to catch herself or nothing. A couple of the moms gasped and ran over to help her. Once they got her to her feet, she started acting like she broke her freaking neck. She moaned in pain, begging for an ambulance. Oh, whatever. I didn't hit her that hard. I've got weak arms. But she played it up as the moms led her to a chair. She was even limping a little bit. One of the moms turns towards me and says, "Well, that was real childish of you." I ignored her. I wasn't paying her any attention, but then she grabs my arm, turns me towards her, and says, "Did you hear me?" I was already mad and seeing red, and this lady really thought she could snatch me up like a child. Without even thinking, I pulled my arm back and smacked the lady across the face, telling her to keep her paws off me. All the other moms screamed out in horror and yelled at me to leave. I was leaving anyway. By that time, my husband had ran up to my side. "What happened?" he said. I told him that I'll tell him later, and we started speed walking to the parking lot. The coach cut in front of us and said, "Wait a minute, y'all need to wait for the police." My husband shoved right past him, but the coach grabbed him by the back of the shirt and swung my husband to the ground. I kid y'all not, they start rumbling right there on the field. Next thing I know, I'm on top of the coach like a spider monkey trying to get him off my husband. In the background, I could hear kids on the team screaming and footsteps as the other dads on the team run up to pull us apart. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, that coach was whooping my husband's butt, but I feel like I was helping a little bit. The other dads were finally able to pull them apart, and once me and my husband got loose, we made a run for the car, just as the ambulance was pulling up. We didn't see any police cars though, so we hopped in our vehicle, trying to act normal in front of the kids, and headed to the hospital for my son. Thank God, the way that our vehicle was parked in the parking lot, the kids did not see the fight, but boy did we look rough. My husband got away with a couple cuts and bruises, and I had grass stains all on my knees. The kids kept asking, "What happened? Why do you look like that?" We made up excuses, but they didn't believe it, so I said, "Who wants to grab McDonald's before we go to the hospital?" They completely forgot all about it and stopped asking, so I grabbed some McDonald's and we head to the hospital. Once I get my son checked in and checked out, they'll let us know there's no concussion or serious injuries. This is great news. But I was worried about what happened at the soccer field. They did say they were going to call the police. So I called the police station, but they said my name was clear, so was my husband's. No charges were pressed against us, but we probably won't be able to go back to that same soccer league next year. It kind of sucks for my son, but I'd much rather he play in a league that isn't being bribed by parents. But violence is never the way to go. Please learn from my mistakes. There are many other ways to handle situations like this. Would I ever put my hands on someone else or throw a soccer ball at them again? No. Was it worth it? To me, yeah. I'm always gonna defend my son, and I'm always gonna have his back, whether he wants me to or not. Here's my question to you and your followers, Luna. If there's an issue with another child bullying your child, you should go to the parents, right? But what if the parents don't do anything about it? Then what do you do? At this point, it's looking like I'm going to have to teach my son self-defense. Thanks for listening, Luna. Thank you so much for sitting in your story time, and besties, let me know in the comments what you think. Happy Juneteenth.